All right, guys, what's going on? Welcome back to the Everything College Football Podcast. Today, me and Nick are in 2023 preview and prediction for the Maryland Terrapins. Look at this coaching staff. Mike Locksley, 21-28 through 5 years. That record doesn't fully do it justice here. I think he's doing a pretty good job for this ball club. Offensive coordinator, Nick, this is pretty unique. Josh Gaddis and Kevin Sumlin pair up for their first season each year. Defensive coordinator Brian Williams enters his 5th year. Looking for the 3rd straight winning season for the first time since 2003 is this program. Looking at this offense, Nick, it certainly has been a little less than desirable. 4 touchdowns per game on average, 66 in college football. Pretty average across the board. Talia Tagovailoa has yet to really take that next level step. This is a guy that has some impressive mobility, nice accurate arm with some good strength. Has good zip and placement on those short routes, good touch on deeper routes, good at making plays outside of the pocket. He does take too many sacks, though, and those mechanics still need some work. Overall, what are your thoughts on Talia so far? It really hasn't lived up to the expectations of maybe his brother. And also, what's this interesting dynamic we have now with Josh Gaddis and Kevin Sumlin teaming up? A very unique option here on this offensive side of the ball.
Certainly is very unique seeing Gaddis and Sumlin coaching together. Gaddis at Alabama with Locksley, they were co-offensive coordinators together when they were both at Alabama in 2018, working with some incredible wide receivers there. Then Gaddis goes Michigan. Not the worst offense at Michigan. It just wasn't really seeming to make a lot of sense. Seemed like him and Harbaugh were not on the same page. Had a nasty divorce. He ends up in Miami in that offense last year. Yes, there were a lack of weapons, but boy, was that offense absolutely disappointing in Miami last year. He gets fired after one season and now kind of rebounds and lands in Miami and in Maryland. Not a bad spot, not a bad spot to be in. And I look at Kevin Summerlin, did not have a bad career at A&M. I think he got a lot more hate than he probably deserved at A&M. People certainly, it is important to note that, he did kind of benefit with the situation he landed in. Obviously having Johnny Manziel his first season where they went 11-2 certainly helped. But he was a solid coach, didn't finish below 7-5 at all during his tenure. 51-26 record overall at A&M, and then he spent time at Arizona where that was a complete disaster out there in the Pac-12, and then was most recently coaching in the USFL with the Houston Gamblers. Finds himself back in college. I think this is a good spot for him. Good offensive mind, obviously, when he worked with Johnny Manziel. He helped create a fantastic offense there and had great experience in the past as offensive coordinators at A&M, at Oklahoma, and teams of that nature. So I think this is a good hire for Maryland here. I think Talia Tagovailoa is slowly learning and getting up to that speed. Of course, had big shoes to live up to of his brother, originally committed to Alabama, of course, and transferred out when it seemed like that wasn't going to be his future. He ended up in College Park. I thought that was a fantastic move for him when he first made the move there. And now as he spent some time out here in Maryland, he's gotten better as the seasons have gone on, but we're still waiting to kind of see him fully hit that full level. Over 3,000 yards passing the past 2 seasons, but he did drop off in his touchdowns this past season. He had 26 in 2021. He had 18 this past season. He cut down the interceptions, though, and he has some good experience. He's played some good football here at Maryland. I think he's a good quarterback. I think he's a good leader in the locker room. I like him in the pocket. I think he's got great field vision. The completion rate is fantastic, 67%. Like I said, that TD to interception ratio was getting better. So I think this offense is in good hands with Tagovailoa leading them.
Mike Locksley's offense features plenty of 11 personnel, lots of inside zone, plenty of play action from the pistol. And Josh Gaddis, 2 years ago, won the Broyles Award with Michigan in a very similar scheme where he thrived. Kevin Sumlin, this is always a one-back-four wide receiver set scheme kind of guy. So I think they're going to mix and match a little bit here. And I think that's going to be beneficial for this offense, especially when you look at receiver. Tyrese Chambers comes over from FIU, good route running, speed and ability to adjust downfield, strong hands. He had 24 yards per catch in 2021. Not the best yards after catch or burst, but when he gets open, he's not hard to miss. Caden Prather, this is a guy who's a legit vertical threat, uses his frame to be effective on contested catches, a smooth route runner with some strong hands at 6'4", 211, coming over from West Virginia. And then Corey Deitch is the second leading pass catcher listed as a tight end. He has wide receiver-like movements at 6'2", 220. Also returned Jashawn Jones, who's been around forever as a versatile player. Lacks speed, but he's a physical, competitive playmaker. Octavian Smith, a true sophomore, has some great speed and elusiveness. Ty Felton also has elite speed, really good unit, maybe even better than a season ago, Nick. I think this is great. You add these two coordinators, I think they're going to blend in very well together, especially what they have in terms of talent. You like who they have at quarterback, who's going to only continue to get better, I would assume. They have a receiving core right here. It's really going to be testy, I think, in the Big Ten this year. Very excited for this passing attack.
There is a very nice balance with this, passing core. I think this is a good wide receiving core. Jashawn Jones led the team in receiving yards last year, 557 for him, 12.7 yards per catch, 4 scores. Corey Dykes can play that kind of wide receiver role. Not a bad piece at all. I think he's a solid player, nearly 500 yards receiving, 12.7 yards per catch for him, and 3 scores as well this past season. They bring in some nice pieces out of the portal. They hit the portal. They bring in Chambers. They bring in Panther as well. These are two solid guys they add in. I think this is a solid wide receiving core. And like I said, I think Tua Tagovailoa is getting better as time goes on. It's not a bad quarterback to be throwing it to those guys.
And I like what they have in the backfield, too. Roman Hemby stepped up last year, home run hitter with some great burst. He had 4 runs of 45-plus yards, has that extra gear, a valuable pass catcher. Raymond Brown, this is a guy they're very high on, a former 4-star, 6'2", 212. He's a tank of a runner, some speed and impressive ability. Has some good vision in the hole also. Biggest problem here, though, this offense only returns 4 starters. They lose 4 of their top 5 pass catchers. They lose 4 starters on the O-line. And this unit was 121st in sacks allowed in 2022. Way too many negative plays. Opposing fronts were just able to crash down with ease. They really had to showcase a commitment to the running game. You might also have a bit of a QB battle with Billy Edwards. He got some snaps. Better runner and more physical player than Tua. So I think if things go south, he might get involved. DJ Glaze at tackle, though. He's a great pass blocker a season ago. He's back to man down the right tackle spot. Gottlieb Ayedazi, 6'5", 300 at tackle, comes home to boost his stock as a transfer. Reports say he could have cracked the draft in 2022. Andre Roy has some potential as physical specimen. Limited depth at his tackle position, though. Colin Deary transfers to TCU. Eric Harris was solid at the end of the year. He's going to be the center. Mason Lunsford, he was their best interior O-line. He transfers out. Kyle Long at guard. He's impressed the staff, but lacks the experience. I think transfers Corey Brooks. And then Marcus DeMerville from NC Central and LSU. Those guys are going to battle in the interior. And then again, kicker Chad Ryland, he's also going to depart. So points won't be as easy when they cross midfield. I listed a lot of negatives here, Nick, but I'm also still pretty positive this offense will produce this year. Overall, what are your thoughts on a unit that I give, a pretty favorable B+ to?
This is a good unit. I think B is kind of where they land for me. I think there is some serious talent here. I think Hemby is a good guy to have at running back. I like returning him, nearly 1,000 yards rushing last year, 5.3 yards per carry, plus 10 scores for him. The offensive line turnover concerns me a little bit. I think Eric Harris at center is a solid piece. Glaze at right tackle, one of the better right tackles in the conference. They're a very solid piece to have. They made some moves in the portal. They picked up some pieces. Corey Bullock out of the portal. So they certainly made that portal work. They wanted to grab pieces in, slot guys in at right guard, left tackle, fill some holes. I think, losing the kicker is a definitely underrated loss. I don't know if people are giving enough attention to that. Ryland is a very solid kicker, one of the better kickers in college football, consistent. You knew you were going to get points from him if you crossed into that sort of field goal range, so tough to replace that. I think that's a very underrated loss. Overall, I think Kyle Long is also a solid piece as well, so I think this is a good offense. I think B is where I'm going to land here, but when you have those two guys calling the plays, very experienced offensive staff with Loxley and the 2 offensive coordinators.
They lose 14 players in the portal, including 6 on the O-line and C.J. Dupree at tight end to Alabama. They also added 6 players, though. Overall, they'll B+ offense for me. I think this is going to be an interesting year, but some of those negatives could really be something to monitor this year. At the Maryland defense, this is a unit that was actually pretty consistent a season ago. 42nd in points per game allowed, 43rd a position behind in yards per game allowed. You look at the portal, they lost 8 guys, including 2 good defensive linemen. They added 4, 2 at defensive line and in the secondary each. They returned 5 starters. They lose 3 good defensive linemen overall. They lose 2 really good corners. Only 24 sacks last year, which was 88th in college football. Their run defense was solid, but they allowed 200+ 4 times. They went 1-3 in those games. Secondary is very good at limiting big plays. They were elite over the last 6 games of the year. Isaac Bunyan at defensive line, 6'3", 300 from Ghana, was a good run defender in his limited snaps. Donnell Brown at defensive end. He was an elite player at St. Francis, was a strong run defender, great pass rusher. His tackling needs some refinement, but he does also join the Big Ten now. Jordan Phillips, 6'2", 295 from Tennessee. Tommy Akinbizote, he was not good one bit for them. I'm concerned for this defensive line and this pass rush. Ryan Wilmot should see the field a lot more. They've never been productive, Nick, on the defensive line, but they've been able to do good things. 38th nationally against the run, but once again, 1-3 in games they allowed 200+ yards in.
Certainly, this defensive line has concerned me for a little bit here. There's no real production here. They struggled after the quarterback. Not fantastic in getting the sacks. 24 total sacks, 88th in the country. Not a great number at all. I think Bunyan, I like his size, 6'3", 300 pounds. They bring in Jordan Phillips. He has the potential. Played at Tennessee, obviously a solid Tennessee team in the SEC in terms of defense. This unit certainly concerns me. The lack of production on the defensive line and getting after the quarterback is something that's seriously concerning.
Looking at the linebacking core, Jayshon Barham, this is a guy that arrived last year's 130th ranked prospect, and they were able to keep him in state. He delivered as the highest graded player on this defense as a true freshman. They promised him playing time, and he promised them playmaking. This guy has elite change of direction. He was the leading sack getter for them And like we just talked about some of the pass rushing concerns, they might need him to play outside linebacker a little bit more. That was his natural position in high school. So I think that's certainly going to be a positive. He was also really good in coverage this past season. The backup Fanaji Gote was really good in coverage as well. Struggled a little bit in run support. Ruben Hapalite wasn't any good for them. Caleb Wheatland was a solid run stopper overall. I think this linebacking group has depth and experience, and I think Jayshon Barham, this is going to be a great player this upcoming season. I think he might be one of those guys that wraps up 120 tackles, 10 plus TFL, and route to a first or second all conference team, Nick.
Very talented player here, and Barham, I think you return a guy like that. Got great experience as a freshman. 58 total tackles, 6.5 tackles for loss, 4 sacks, led the team in sacks. Kind of concerning that's your sack leader there, but I think Barham showed that he's a very versatile, very athletic piece that can do a whole lot. At linebacker, I think, Gote as well is not a bad piece. He had 37 total tackles this past season. So those two guys together, solid piece. I think this linebacking unit's good. I think there is some nice depth here. It's not a bad group overall.
Looking at the defensive backfield, Bayou Braid at safety. He was good all around for them. Here's their leading tackler. This is a player they're certainly going to lean on this year. They lose a lot of athleticism at corner, though. Deontay Banks, Jacorian Bennett, those guys were phenomenal for them. Slot man Herb Still was really good, and they're grateful to have him back manning that position down. Dante Trade will probably occupy the other safety position. He was their most versatile player, second on the team in tackles. Avante Williams, he was flat out poor for Miami over the last 2 years. This was a former prized recruit, though, looking for a fresh start, and I think that might be beneficial for both sides. Jaquan Shepard arrives from Cincinnati. Wasn't much of an asset, but he does come from that Luke Fickell DB factory. Defense won't be productive, but I think they'll be good, Nick. That's really been the theme for the Terrapins the last couple of years. This defense has been tough. They do not produce one bit. They don't really get in the backfield a whole lot. The defensive line, they're not going to put up any lofty numbers. But I'm going to go on a hunch here, and I'm going to give this unit a pretty good grade. I think a B+, or a B- rather, is right where they belong. I think the run defense versus quality opponents, and again, that overall production needs to improve. But I think this is a unit that's going to be very sound. It's not going to be a hard out. It's not going to be an easy out one bit.
I think Bo Brady is a fantastic player. 85 total tackles, led the team, 4 tackles for loss. Trader as well, 62 total tackles, solid piece. Still 46 total tackles, 4 tackles for loss for him and Brady. I think those are solid numbers. This secondary, I like it a lot. They have to replace some talent, like losing Deontay Banks to the NFL draft. He was a first-round draft pick. Overall, I think this is a good secondary. The secondary is probably the best part of this defense. I think there is some nice depth here, some good experience. These guys have played nice, meaningful snaps. This is a solid secondary. I think the pass yards per game number at 222 per game can definitely come down this year. I think it'll be close to 200. I think this is a solid defense. I think a B-, kind of is a great grade for this defense. I like what I'm seeing out of this Maryland defense. There's a lot of potential production here.
That'd be really good news for them if they can approach that 200 yards per game allowed in the secondary. It's going to be hard without those quality man coverage corners out there. Look at the preview and the schedule here. High upside offense has great depth at these skilled positions. They got a quality passer with leadership. That development of Talia and the offensive line. Will there be the contingent factors in this team potentially overachieving? The 2 new minds on offense at OC will certainly lead to improvements versus higher quality competition. I think that's definitely going to be something you see this year. The defense has some reasonable concerns on the D line, but the run defense was terrific more often than not. The middle of the defense should continue to show progression, while the secondary has some retooling to do, but the quality pieces they have, nonetheless, I think will be beneficial for them. The lack of pass rush, mixed with a potential regression in the back end, Nick, could be fatal for this football team. 8-4 for me. You look at the schedule, it's a pretty simple one in September. They play at Ohio State, a team they have had on the ropes numerous times over the last couple of years. And I have them losing 3 home games in a row, Illinois, Penn State, and Michigan. I think it's almost a guarantee they steal one from one of those teams. There's some good plus money on the over 7.5, Nick. I have 8 here. I think 9 wins is very obtainable because, again, I have them losing 3 home games in a row, which does not seem realistic one bit. Those are good football teams. I think they're almost destined to knock one of them off.
I certainly think this is a very nice schedule. Out of conference, Towson, Charlotte, Virginia, not a bad out of conference schedule at all. At Michigan State, not a bad road trip. At Northwestern, at Nebraska, at Rutgers, pretty good draw on the road. I think all those teams have major question marks. At Ohio State, of course, Columbus, tough place to play, so certainly can expect them to lose that one. But they have been competitive with the Buckeyes in recent years. You highlight those 3 home games, right? Illinois, Penn State, Michigan. Like you said, you got to think they're going to get one of those games, right? 1 out of 3. I think they can certainly get 1 out of 3. I'm leaning, Penn State. I think Penn State could find themselves in some trouble here. I think 8-4, 9-3 is certainly very achievable. 10 wins is certainly possible for this team if they're firing on all cylinders and they squash those questions we have in the secondary and find a pulse in the pass rush. This is a fun team. I think they're heading in the right direction under Mike Locksley. I think College Park, Maryland is a fun place to play. I think the fans are excited about this. I think this team is kind of finding a groove under their head coach. back-to-back winning seasons here. They're looking for a third straight. I think they're going to get to a third straight this year. I think Maryland's an attractive place to play. They're recruiting better. They're keeping guys in state. They're fighting off some of those other teams in the region. They're keeping the talent in state. This is a very exciting Maryland team long term. I think they're heading in the right direction.
The one thing that's consistent in all 4 losses here is this team certainly has plenty of question marks in the trenches, and all 4 of those teams are stout in the trenches on both offense and defense. That's something that's certainly going to trouble them. I'm very excited to watch this football team this year. I think all 4 losses they circled. This is going to be a game that you watch. It's really going to float under the radar, but me and you will be watching.
Absolutely. I think this is a very fun schedule. I think it's not a bad Big Ten schedule at all. Very creative. I think they have some nice potential here to pick up some big wins against some good teams.
For today's episode, guys, make sure you like, comment, subscribe. See you next time.